It appears that there was quite a bit of force and vibration exerted on the saw with that blade spinning off centre, and we can see that here. If I take my adjustable square and use the track on the saw to reference to the blade, got that ruler just touching on the edge of that tooth there. Now if I bring that same tooth down to this side of this end of the saw and run my square down the track, keeping it in the track, it's pretty sure it's that tooth there. Now if you have a look at that, there's an obvious gap there. It's to me it's quite a big gap. It's at least 1 millimetre. So yes, it's knocked the saw out of alignment. So definitely something that needs to be fixed. Need to get in and readjust that now. So to make the adjustment on this blade, I want to know, has the front of the blade moved across this way, or has the back of the blade moved across this way? Now the reason why I want to know that is I'd like to get it back to where it was so that it doesn't interfere too much with the sleds that I already have made up for this saw. So I thought to myself, how am I going to find that out? And what I decided to do was maybe use my zero clearance Midas sled, because I only just recently made this sled for this saw, and maybe that'll give me a good reference of the alignment of the blade. So if I progress that through just into the front of the blade, I can straight away see that that blade is perfectly aligned with that slot. And if I slide the sled up towards the back of the blade, I can now easily see that this side of the kerf in the sled is actually touching on the body of the blade. So that's good. What that tells me is that the back of the blade has moved across to my left. So what that means is that the back of the saw blade assembly, which consists of 2 brackets, a front and rear bracket and a front and rear trunnion, has to move slightly this way. There's 2 bolts at the front here and 2 bolts at the rear that need to be accessed. This bolt here and the 2 rear ones seem like they're fairly accessible. This bolt here right at the front is almost impossible to get to. So what I'm hoping to do is leave that bolt, loosen off these 3 and just knock the mechanism slightly this way to line it up. So we'll see how we go with that. The front left bracket bolt that I need to get to is actually just inside this slot here for the blade adjustment handle. You might not be able, I don't know if you can see it up there or not, right there. So at least I can hopefully get to that through this front slot. And the rear 2 bolts are more accessible because they're in the back there, but that whole back panel actually comes off. You can see the screws there. So they're going to be pretty easy to get to. The only problem for me is though, I can't get into the back of this saw unless I actually move it. So that's a little bit of a bigger job for me because I have to disconnect the dust extraction, which is connected by solid pipe. It's not flexible hose. So yeah, so I'm going to have to undo all that and move the saw out completely so I can get into the back of it. But it's just a job that has to be done, and just got to get in and do it. Well, I've happily realised that once I've got access, or better access to the back of this saw, I don't need to take this cover off at all because the adjustment or mounting screws are right there and I can get my Allen key into them, so that's great. Well, with a lot of toing and froing from tapping that back bracket and coming back up and checking the blade and then tapping the bracket again and coming back to the blade, yeah, it is a little bit involved, the process, because when you tap the back and move the blade over slightly, it does affect the front, not as much as the back, but it still does affect the front, so you're always going between the 2. But I'm pretty sure I've got it exactly where I want it now. I've re-tightened the bolts, because actually tightening the bolts can actually pull things out as well, out of alignment slightly. Just want to show you this little thing here I made. So simple. All I did was get a piece of stock that sits in the track, screwed and glued this piece at 90 degrees to that. On the end there, I've got a screw with a super fine thread, so I can make some very fine adjustments with that screw head. And all I do is I put that in the track and use that against the body of the blade with a set of feeler gauges to get it right. Okay, so I have a point marked on the blade. I'll just bring that around. There, just got that marked with the number 1, and using my little gauge here, if I put that feeler gauge in there, this is a 2 thou feeler gauge. Now there's a bit of resistance there, I can feel that resistance as it goes through the gap. And now what we'll do is we'll move that that same point of the blade across to the other side. Slide my little gauge across, and also move the camera so you can see what we're doing. And if I use that same 2 thou feeler gauge over here, I'm getting exact same resistance that I was getting on the front edge.